The sound of handcuffs ratcheting tight around Dr. Vivian Clark's wrists echoed sharper than a gunshot in the quiet suburb of Oak Creek. Officer Brody Miller smirked, convinced he had just snagged a high-profile burglar in the act. He saw a black woman in a driveway he decided she didn't belong in. He saw a suspect. What he didn't see was the wedding ring on her finger or the name on the mailbox. But most importantly, he didn't see who she was dialing on her phone with trembling fingers. He thought she was calling a lawyer. He was wrong. She was calling the man who signed his paychecks. In exactly 20 minutes, Officer Miller wouldn't just lose his badge, he would lose everything. The rain had been relentless all day, hammering against the glass facade of St. Jude's Memorial Hospital. Dr. Vivian Clark massaged her temples, the phantom echo of the OR monitors still beeping in her ears. It had been a 20-hour shift, a double trauma case, a pile-up on I-95 that had left a family of 4 fighting for their lives. She had saved the mother and the youngest son, but the father hadn't made it. Vivienne was 42, though her skin, usually radiant and rich with the hue of deep mahogany, looked tired under the harsh parking lot lights. She adjusted the collar of her beige trench coat, shielding herself from the drizzle as she walked toward her Tesla Model X. She just wanted to go home. She wanted a glass of Pinot Noir, a hot bath, and the silence of her living room. She pulled out of the hospital lot, the silence of the electric engine soothing her frayed nerves. The drive to Oak Creek was usually 30 minutes, a transition zone between the chaos of the emergency room and the sanctuary of her private life. Oak Creek was old money. It was a place of manicured lawns, wrought iron gates, and neighbors who knew exactly when you put your trash bins out, but pretended not to see you at the grocery store. Vivienne and her husband, Raymond, had moved in 6 months ago. They were the only black family on the cul-de-sac of Sycamore Ridge. As she turned off the highway and navigated the winding roads leading to the gated community, she noticed a patrol car idling near the entrance. It was a standard Oak Creek PD cruiser, black and white with the town seal, an oak tree blazoned on the door. She didn't think much of it. She tapped the brakes, slowing down to the mandated 25 miles per hour. In her rearview mirror, the headlights of the cruiser flared to life. Vivian sighed. "Not tonight," she whispered to the empty car. "Please, not tonight." She wasn't speeding. Her tags were up to date. She kept her hands at 10 and 2, eyes forward. But the cruiser didn't pass her. It trailed her, maintaining a predatory distance, turning left when she turned left, turning right when she turned right. Her heart rate, usually steady even when she was holding a scalpel millimeters from a cerebral artery, began to climb. She turned onto Sycamore Ridge. Her house, a sprawling modern colonial with white pillars, stood at the end of the lane. As she activated her turn signal to pull into her own driveway, the cruiser's lights exploded, red and blue strobes bouncing off the wet asphalt and blinding her mirrors. She killed the engine. The garage door opener was clipped to her visor, but she didn't reach for it. She knew the drill. She knew the script better than the anatomy textbooks she had memorized in med school. Hands on the wheel, interior light on, window down. Breathe. She watched in the side mirror as 2 figures emerged. The first was tall, broad-shouldered, with a buzz cut that looked aggressive even in the rain. This was Officer Brody Miller. He walked with a swagger that suggested he was looking for a fight, his hand already resting near his holster. The second, trailing behind him, was younger, slighter, Officer Stan Kowalski. He looked nervous, his eyes darting toward the large houses flanking the street. Miller tapped on the glass with his knuckles, hard. Vivian rolled the window down. The smell of rain and wet asphalt rushed in, followed by the scent of stale coffee on Miller's breath. "License and registration," Miller demanded. No greeting, no, "Good evening, ma'am." "Is there a problem, officer?" Vivian asked, her voice calm, controlled. She was a neurosurgeon. She commanded operating theaters. She wasn't going to let a patrolman rattle her. "I asked for your license and registration," Miller repeated, louder this time. He shined his flashlight directly into her eyes. Vivian squinted, but didn't flinch. "My identification is in my purse, which is on the passenger seat," she stated clearly. "I am going to reach over and get it." "Keep your hands where I can see them," Miller barked. "Officer, you just asked for my ID," Vivian said, fighting the urge to snap. "I cannot levitate it to you. I have to reach for it." "Step out of the car," Miller ordered, stepping back and unsnapping the retention strap on his holster. "For what reason?" Vivian asked, her grip tightening on the steering wheel. "I'm in my own driveway. I have committed no traffic violation." "You fit the description of a suspect involved in a string of break-ins in this area," Miller lied. It was a lazy lie, one he had used a dozen times before. Suspicious vehicle, lingering in a high-value neighborhood. "Now step out of the vehicle, or I will remove you." Kowalski stepped forward, looking uneasy. "Brody, maybe we should run the plates first. It's a Tesla X, not exactly a getaway car." "Quiet, Stan," Miller snapped without looking back. "She's stalling. Step out. Now." Vivian calculated her options. If she refused, he would drag her out. If she complied, she might be able to de-escalate. She unbuckled her seatbelt slowly. "I am stepping out," she announced. She opened the door and rose to her full height. She was wearing tailored scrubs under her trench coat, and her hospital badge clipped to her chest caught the reflection of the strobes. "I am Dr. Vivian Clark," she said, projecting her voice so the dashboard camera, and hopefully the neighbors, could hear. "I own this home. This is my property." Miller snorted, looking at the grand house behind her, and then back at her. "You own this?" "Sure. And I'm the Queen of England. Turn around. Hands on the hood." "I will not," Vivian said firmly. "I have identification that proves my residency. Let me show you." "I said hands on the hood," Miller lunged. He grabbed her wrist, twisting it violently behind her back. Pain shot up her shoulder, her surgeon's shoulder, the one she needed steady for 12-hour operations. "Hey!" she cried out, stumbling against the wet metal of her car. "You are hurting me. I am a surgeon." "Stop resisting," Miller shouted, the magic words that justified everything in his mind. He shoved her face down onto the cold, wet hood of the Tesla. "I am not resisting," Vivian yelled, panic finally piercing her composure. "Kowalski, look at my badge. I work at St. Jude's." Kowalski peered closer, seeing the ID card swinging from her scrubs. "Brody, it says Chief of Neurosurgery. Maybe we should—" "Anyone can print a badge, Stan," Miller grunted, pressing his knee into the back of Vivian's thigh. "She's resisting arrest. That's a charge right there." He pulled the handcuffs from his belt. The metal felt ice cold against Vivian's skin as he ratcheted them tight. Too tight. "You are making a mistake," Vivian hissed, her cheek pressed against the wet hood. "A massive mistake." Yeah. Tell it to the judge," Miller scoffed. He hauled her upright, spinning her around. Rainwater dripped from Vivian's hair, running down her face like tears. But she wasn't crying. Her eyes were dry, and they were burning with a cold, terrifying fury. "I don't need to tell the judge," she said, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "I'm going to tell my husband." The neighborhood was waking up. Curtains twitched in the windows of the Colonial across the street. A porch light flickered on 2 doors down. In Oak Creek, a police siren was a spectator sport. Officer Miller shoved Vivian toward the back of his cruiser. He handled her not like a person, not like a citizen, but like a trophy he had bagged. "Get in," Miller growled, pushing her head down to clear the doorframe. "My shoulder," Vivian winced, the angle of her arms behind her back straining the rotator cuff. "Loosen the cuffs. You're cutting off my circulation." "Comfort isn't part of the package, sweetheart," Miller replied, slamming the door shut. Inside the cruiser, the air smelled of molded plastic and stale sweat. Vivian sat awkwardly, shifting her weight to alleviate the pressure on her wrists. Through the wire mesh divider, she watched Miller and Kowalski talking by the hood of her car. Miller was laughing. He was actually laughing. He gestured toward her house, shaking his head, while Kowalski looked at the ground, kicking at a wet patch of gravel. Vivian closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Panicking solves nothing. Anatomy, logic, procedure. She needed her phone. Miller opened the driver's side door and slid in, bringing a gust of wet air with him. Kowalski got in the passenger side, pulling out a clipboard. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4 Alpha," Miller radioed in, his voice brimming with unearned confidence. "We have one female suspect in custody. Resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, potential B and E suspect." "Copy that, 4 Alpha." The dispatcher's voice crackled. "Officer," Vivian spoke up from the back seat, "I am requesting my phone call immediately, before we leave this driveway." Miller glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his eyes narrowing. "You watch too many movies. You get a call when you get processed at the station." "Actually," Vivian corrected him, citing the specific state statute. "Under Article 14, Section 3 of the State Criminal Procedure Law, given that I have identified myself and requested legal counsel, and since you have not yet read me my Miranda rights, denying me contact with legal representation while still on the premises of my alleged residence constitutes a violation of due process." Silence filled the car. Kowalski turned around, eyes wide. "She knows the codes, Brody." Miller griped the steering wheel. He hated smart suspects. He hated anyone who made him feel small. "We're going to the station. If you drive this car off my property without verifying my identity," Vivian said, her voice razor-sharp, "it becomes kidnapping. And frankly, Officer Miller, with your current conduct, I don't think you can afford a kidnapping charge on top of assault and battery." "Assault?" Miller laughed, starting the engine. "I followed protocol. You twisted the arm of a neurosurgeon," Vivian said. "If I have nerve damage, if my hand tremors tomorrow, the lawsuit I file will be worth more than the entire annual budget of the Oak Creek Police Department." Kowalski put a hand on Miller's arm. "Brody, stop. Let's just check her ID properly. If she lives here—" "She doesn't live here, Stan. Look at this place." Miller gestured at the manicured lawn. "You think she owns a $3 million house?" "My name is Dr. Vivian Clark," she repeated slowly. "My husband is Raymond Clark." Miller froze. His hand hovered over the gear shift. The name Raymond Clark held weight, heavy weight. Everyone in law enforcement knew the name, though few in the rank and file had met him yet. He was the newly elected district attorney for the county. He had run on a platform that terrified the good old boys club: transparency, accountability, and an end to qualified immunity for gross misconduct. He was the wolf of the courthouse. Miller looked back at her. For a second, doubt flickered in his eyes. But his pride was a stubborn beast. He looked at the woman in the back, disheveled, wet, handcuffed. She didn't look like the wife of the most powerful lawyer in the county. She looked like someone trying to bluff her way out of a cell. "Raymond Clark is a white guy," Miller sneered. "I saw his campaign posters. You telling me you're his wife?" Vivian stared at him, her expression unreadable. "Yes." Miller laughed again, a harsh, barking sound. "Yeah, and I'm the Easter Bunny. You're lying to an officer. That's another charge. He put the car in drive. Wait! Kowalski shouted. Brody, look! Kowalski was pointing at the dashboard computer. He had run the plates of the Tesla while they were arguing. Owner: Clark, Vivian. A. Address: 44 Sycamore Ridge, Oak Creek. Co-owner: Clark, Raymond J. The color drained from Kowalski's face. Brody, the car is registered to this address. It's her house, and the co-owner is Raymond Clark. Miller stomped on the brake. The cruiser lurched to a halt before it even left the driveway. The rain drummed loudly on the roof, ticking away the seconds of silence. Miller stared at the screen. He read it once, twice. He swallowed hard. It could be a stolen car, Miller stammered, grasping at straws. Maybe she stole the car and the ID. Officer Miller, Vivian said, her voice calm but terrifyingly final. My phone is in my right pocket. If you are smart, and I am beginning to doubt that you are, you will take it out, unlock it with Face ID, and dial the contact labeled hubby. Or you can take me to the station, book me, and explain to Raymond Clark why his wife is in a holding cell instead of cooking dinner. Miller looked at Kowalski. Kowalski looked like he wanted to vanish into the upholstery. Give her the phone, Brody, Kowalski whispered. Do it now. Miller turned off the engine. He got out of the car, walked to the back door, and opened it. The rain was coming down harder now. He reached into her pocket, his movements less aggressive, more hesitant. He pulled out the sleek iPhone. He held it up to her face. The screen unlocked. Dial it, Vivian commanded. Miller scrolled to the favorites. There it was, hubby. He pressed the call button and held it to her ear, his hand trembling slightly. The line rang once, twice. Hey, Viv, a deep, warm voice answered. I'm just leaving the office. You beat me home. Raymond, Vivian said, her eyes locked on Miller's terrified face. I need you to come home. Now. What's wrong? The warmth vanished from Raymond's voice, replaced by a sharp alertness. Are you okay? I am currently handcuffed in the back of a police cruiser in our driveway, Vivian said clearly. Officer Brody Miller, badge number 492, seems to think I broke into our own house. He has assaulted me. He has refused to verify my identity until now, and he implied that I couldn't possibly live here because of what I look like. On the other end of the line, there was a pause, a silence so heavy it felt like the air pressure dropped. Is the officer there? Raymond asked. His voice was no longer that of a husband. It was the voice of the district attorney, cold and lethal. He is holding the phone, Vivian said. Put him on. Vivian looked at Miller. He wants to talk to you. Miller pulled the phone away from her ear and put it to his own. He looked like a man holding a live grenade. This is Officer Miller, he squeaked. Miller, the voice on the phone boomed. This is District Attorney Raymond Clark. You have exactly 10 seconds to tell me why my wife is in cuffs, or so help me God, I will bring the wrath of the entire judicial system down on your head, so hard your grandchildren will feel it. The silence that followed Raymond Clark's threat was heavy, drowning out the rhythmic drumming of the rain on the cruiser's roof. Officer Brody Miller held the phone away from his ear, as if it were a venomous snake. He looked at the screen. The call had ended. The DA hadn't waited for a response. He was coming. Get her out, Kowalski whispered, his voice trembling. Brody, get her out of the car right now. Uncuff her. Miller sat frozen for a moment, his brain misfiring. The adrenaline of the bust had curdled into a sickly dread. He scrambled out of the driver's seat, nearly slipping on the wet asphalt. He yanked the back door open. Step out, Miller said. His voice lacked the bark from earlier. It was hollow, breathless. Vivian didn't move immediately. She sat there, regal even in her disheveled state. staring at him with eyes that promised retribution. "Are you ordering me or asking me, officer?" "Just—" "Please step out, ma'am," Miller muttered, the ma'am tasting like ash in his mouth. Vivian swung her legs out. She stood up, wincing as the movement pulled at her shoulders. Miller fumbled for his keys, his hands shaking so badly he dropped them once into a puddle. He cursed under his breath, snatched them up, and jammed the small key into the handcuffs. Click, click. The metal fell away. Vivian brought her hands in front of her. She didn't rub her wrists immediately. Instead, she held them up to the light of the cruiser. Deep red welts encircled the dark skin, the metal having bitten deep. Her right thumb was twitching, a subtle, involuntary spasm. Vivian stared at the tremor. It was slight, barely noticeable to a layman, but to a neurosurgeon it was a scream. It was the difference between a successful clipping of an aneurysm and a catastrophic bleed. "My hand," she whispered, horror replacing the anger for the first time. "I didn't put them on that tight," Miller lied instinctively, backing away. "You were moving around." Before Vivian could respond, the roar of an engine tore through the night. A silver Porsche Panamera swung onto Sycamore Ridge, taking the corner with aggressive precision. It didn't slow down until the last second, screeching to a halt directly behind Miller's cruiser, boxing him in. The door flew open. Raymond Clark stepped out. He was a man who took up space. Tall, wearing a charcoal wool coat over a suit that cost more than Miller made in 3 months, Raymond didn't look like a hysterical husband. He looked like an executioner arriving at the gallows. He didn't run. He walked with terrifying, purposeful strides, oblivious to the rain soaking his silver fox hair. "Raymond," Vivian exhaled, the adrenaline finally dumping out of her system. She took a step toward him and stumbled. Raymond caught her. His movements shifted instantly from aggressive to tender. He held her upright, his eyes scanning her face, then dropping immediately to her wrists. He saw the welts. He saw the tremor in her thumb. He looked up at Miller. Miller had faced hardened criminals, gang members, and meth addicts. He had never felt the kind of fear he felt looking into the pale blue eyes of the district attorney. "Officer Miller," Raymond said. His voice was low, barely audible over the rain, which made it infinitely more terrifying. "You have 30 seconds to explain why you assaulted my wife on our property before I destroy your life." "Sir, with all due respect," Miller started, falling back on his training. "I was on patrol. I saw a suspicious vehicle lingering at the entrance. I followed it." The suspect, Raymond cut him off, sharpening the word like a blade. "Is Dr. Vivienne Clark, the chief of neurosurgery at St. Jude's. Did you ask for ID?" "I asked. She refused," Miller blurted out. "He is lying," Vivian said quietly, leaning against Raymond's chest. "He asked for ID, but when I told him I needed to reach for it, he drew his weapon's retention strap and escalated. He threw me onto the hood, Raymond. He wrenched my arm behind my back. I told him I was a surgeon. I told him my shoulder was hurting." He laughed. Raymond's jaw tightened. He looked at Kowalski, who was standing by the trunk of the cruiser, looking like he wanted to be invisible. "Officer Kowalski," Raymond called out. "You're the rookie, right? 6 months out of the academy?" "Yes, sir," Kowalski squeaked. "I want the truth," Raymond said. "Right now, did she refuse ID, or did Miller escalate because he didn't like her tone?" Kowalski looked at Miller, who was glaring at him, a silent warning in his eyes. Code blue. Blue wall of silence. "Don't rat." But Kowalski looked at the massive house, the Porsche, the trembling hand of the surgeon, and the district attorney who held the keys to every prosecution in the county. "She offered to show ID, sir," Kowalski stammered, looking at his boots. "She said it was in her purse. Brody." Officer Miller told her to get out. He got physical fast. I told him we should check the plates first." "You traitor," Miller hissed. "That's enough," Raymond barked. He turned back to Miller. "You profiled her. You saw a black woman in a luxury car in a white neighborhood, and you decided she didn't belong. You wanted to teach her a lesson in humility, didn't you, Miller?" "I was doing my job," Miller shouted, his face turning red. "She fit a description. There have been break-ins." "What description?" Raymond stepped closer, invading Miller's personal space. "Show me the bolo. Be on the lookout." Was the suspect a 42-year-old female doctor in a Tesla? Or are you making it up as you go? Miller didn't answer. He couldn't. There was no specific description, just a vague report of a dark sedan. "Here is what is going to happen," Raymond said, checking his watch. "You are going to give me your badge number and your supervisor's name. Then you are going to get in your car and leave my driveway. If I see you anywhere near this house again, I will have you arrested for stalking." "You can't talk to me like that," Miller sneered, trying to salvage his pride. "I have a union rep. I followed procedure. This is harassment of an officer." Raymond laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. "Harassment. Miller, the sun is going to rise in 6 hours. By the time it sets tomorrow, you're going to wish the only thing you had to worry about was harassment. You hurt a surgeon's hands. Do you have any idea what the liability is on that? You just cost the county millions. You didn't just break protocol, you broke the bank." Raymond turned his back on him, dismissing him as if he were a nuisance insect. He wrapped his arm around Vivian. "Let's go inside, Viv. We need to ice that hand and call your partners." As they walked toward the front door, Miller stood in the rain, humiliated. He watched them go, hatred bubbling in his gut. He turned to Kowalski. "You better lawyer up, kid," Miller spat, "because if I go down, I'm taking you with me." "You went down the second you put cuffs on her, Brody," Kowalski said quietly, getting into the passenger seat. Miller slammed his fist against the hood of the cruiser, leaving a dent. He thought it was over. He thought the worst was a disciplinary hearing, and maybe a suspension. He was wrong. He had no idea that the Tesla Model X, parked silently in the driveway, had been watching the entire time. The interior of the Clark residence was a sanctuary of warmth and soft light, a stark contrast to the cold violence of the driveway. Raymond led Vivian to the kitchen island, immediately fetching a specialized ice pack from the freezer. Vivian sat on a bar stool, her trench coat discarded, staring at her right hand. The tremor was still there. She tried to touch her thumb to her pinky, a basic motor skill test. It was slow. Pain shot up her forearm. "I can't feel the tip of my index finger," she said softly, her voice breaking. "Radical nerve compression." Raymond slammed the freezer door shut, the sound echoing through the large kitchen. "I'm going to kill him. Metaphorically, legally. I am going to obliterate him." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Get me Chief Harrigan. Wake him up. I don't care if he's sleeping. Tell him it's Raymond Clark, and tell him we have a code 3030 situation involving one of his officers." He hung up and looked at Vivian. "I need you to document everything, Viv. Write down every word he said while it's fresh." "He's going to lie, Ray," Vivian said, wincing as the ice touched her wrist. "You know how they do it. He'll write the report tonight. He'll say I lunged at him. He'll say I was reaching for a weapon. It's his word against mine. And even with you as the DA, the union will spin this as rich folks hating cops." Raymond poured her a glass of water, his hand steady, but his eyes burning. Kowalski cracked. "He'll testify." "Kowalski is a rookie," Vivian countered. "The union will pressure him. They'll bully him into changing his story by tomorrow morning. They'll say he panicked." Raymond paced the kitchen floor. He knew she was right. He had seen it happen 100 times in his career. The blue wall was formidable, Without hard evidence, Miller could skate with a slap on the wrist and a paid vacation. "We need video," Raymond muttered. "The dash cam." "He angled the car," Vivienne said, her analytical mind taking over. "When he pulled up, he parked at an angle. His dashcam was pointing at the garage door, not the driver's side of my car where the assault happened. And his body cam... I noticed the light wasn't green. It was red. Flashing red means buffering or off." "Convenient," Raymond scoffed. "He knew what he was doing," Vivienne said. "He created a blind spot." Raymond stopped pacing. He looked at Vivienne, then past her, through the window to the driveway where the Tesla sat in the rain. "Viv," Raymond said slowly, "did you put the car in park?" "Yes." "Does your Tesla have sentry mode enabled?" Vivienne blinked. "It's always on. It records any time someone gets close to the car. But I was in the car." "The Tesla records from all cameras when the alarm is triggered or manually saved," Raymond said, his voice rising with excitement. "But even without that, the new update, it records a loop. Did you honk? Did the alarm go off?" "No." Vivienne shook her head. "But... wait." She reached into her purse with her good hand and pulled out her phone. She opened the Tesla app. "The proximity sensors," she said. "When he slammed me onto the hood, the car might have interpreted that as an impact." She tapped the security tab. "Event recorded, 11:42 p.m. Event recorded, 11:45 p.m. Her breath hitched. She clicked the notification. The video stream loaded on her phone screen. It was crystal clear, high-definition footage from the side repeater camera and the front pillar camera. The angle was perfect. On the small screen, they watched the scene unfold in silence. They saw Miller approach the window. They heard the audio, crisp and clear, picked up by the car's external microphones. "License and registration," Miller's voice sneered from the phone. "I am going to reach over and get it," Vivienne's calm voice. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Then, the violence. The video showed Miller yanking the door open. It showed Vivienne stepping out, hands raised, clearly compliant. It showed Miller grabbing her wrist without provocation. And then, the smoking gun. As Miller slammed her onto the hood, his face passed directly in front of the pillar camera. He was smiling. A split second later, he muttered something that the rain usually would have drowned out, but the car's noise cancellation audio processing isolated perfectly. "Uppity B. H. You think you run this town?" Raymond froze. The slur was undeniable. It wasn't just police brutality. It was a hate crime. It was a civil rights violation, wrapped in a badge. Vivienne looked up at her husband, tears finally spilling over. "He didn't think I was a burglar. He knew I lived here. He just didn't like it." Raymond took the phone from her gently. He pressed save to cloud. "He's dead," Raymond said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "He just handed me his badge, his pension, and his freedom on a silver platter." "What do we do?" Vivienne asked. "We wait," Raymond said. "We let him file his report. We let him lie. We let him swear under oath that you attacked him. We let him dig his grave so deep that he can never climb out." The next morning, the Oak Creek Police Precinct was buzzing with the nervous energy that always followed a critical incident. Officer Brody Miller sat in the break room, nursing a lukewarm coffee. He looked tired, but he felt a strange sense of invincibility. He had spent 2 hours writing his incident report. It was a masterpiece of creative fiction. In Miller's version, the suspect, Vivienne, had been erratic, shouting profanities, and had reached for her waistband. He had used minimum necessary force to detain her for officer safety. He omitted the part where she identified herself as a doctor. He omitted the part where he twisted her arm. His union rep A beefy man named Sergeant Thorne clapped him on the shoulder. "Don't worry about it, Brody," Thorne said. "I heard it was the DA's wife. That's tough luck, but the law is the law. If she was resisting, she was resisting. We'll back you. Clark might be the DA, but he can't rewrite the patrol guide. Just stick to the story. She was aggressive. You feared for your safety." "Yeah," Miller said, forcing a smile. "She was screaming like a banshee. I thought she was on something." "Did you get the body cam footage?" Thorne asked. Battery died," Miller lied smoothly. "Malfunction. I logged it in the equipment repair sheet this morning." Thorne winked. "Good man. Malfunctions happen. Without video, it's he said, she said, and juries love cops." Just then, the door to the break room swung open. The room went silent. Chief Harrigan stood there. He looked like he hadn't slept. His face was grey. "Miller," Harrigan said. "Conference room. Now." "Thorne, you too." Miller stood up, smoothing his uniform. He walked with a swagger. This was just the formality, the slap on the wrist. When he entered the conference room, the air was sucked out of his lungs. Raymond Clark was sitting at the head of the table. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He was wearing casual clothes, which somehow made him look more dangerous. Beside him sat a woman in a sharp blazer, Vivian's personal injury attorney, Eleanor Vance, a fierce litigator known as the Shark. And next to her was a man Miller didn't recognize, but whose expensive briefcase screamed federal. Miller sat down, Thorne beside him. "So," Raymond started, not even looking up from a file folder. "Officer Miller, I've read your report." "It's an accurate account of the event, sir," Miller said, puffing his chest out. "You state here," Raymond read, "that Dr. Clark lunged at the officer with a closed fist and screamed obscenities regarding the police force." "That's correct," Miller said. "And you state that you used soft hand control to guide her to the hood of the car." "Standard procedure," Miller nodded. Raymond finally looked up. He smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Chief Harrigan," Raymond said. "Please play the file." Harrigan looked sick. He pressed a button on the laptop connected to the wall monitor. The screen flickered to life. Miller frowned. It wasn't dashcam footage. The angle was low, looking up from the side of a car. The image was crisp 4K. There was Miller, in high definition. "Uppity BH, you think you run this town?" The audio boomed through the conference room. Miller's face went white. Thorne, the union rep, dropped his pen. The video continued. It showed Vivian standing perfectly still, hands raised. It showed Miller grabbing her, spinning her, and slamming her down with a sickening thud. It showed him wrenching her arm up well past the point of resistance. The video ended. Silence. Total, suffocating silence. "That," Raymond said, pointing at the screen, "is from the Tesla's Sentry mode. It records everything. And that audio, that's you admitting to a racially motivated assault." Miller couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. "Now," Raymond continued, opening another folder. "Let's talk about damages. My wife is a neurosurgeon. Her hands are insured for $20 million. Preliminary x-rays this morning show a scaphoid fracture and nerve damage in her right wrist. She is currently on medical leave. Every surgery she misses costs the hospital roughly $50,000. We are suing you personally. We are suing the department. And we are suing the city." "But that's not all," the man with the briefcase spoke up. "I'm Special Agent Ross with the FBI Civil Rights Division. Based on this video, and the racial slur clearly audible, we are opening a federal investigation into you, Officer Miller, for deprivation of rights under color of law. That carries a prison sentence of up to 10 years. Miller looked at Thorne for help. Thorne physically scooted his chair away from Miller. "I didn't mean—" Miller stammered. "You didn't mean to get caught," Raymond corrected him. "You're done, Miller. Badge, gun, now." Chief Harrigan stood up. "Officer Miller, you are hereby suspended without pay, pending immediate termination proceedings. Surrender your weapon." Miller's hands were shaking so hard he couldn't undo his holster. Harrigan had to reach over and take it from him. "You can't do this," Miller whispered, tears forming in his eyes. "I have a mortgage. I have a kid." "You should have thought about that before you decided to play God in my driveway," Raymond said, standing up. "Oh, and Miller?" Miller looked up, broken. "My wife sends her regards," Raymond said coldly. "Well, she's waiting for you to be booked. She wants to see if the cuffs are too tight." If Officer Brody Miller thought losing his badge was the bottom of the pit, he was wrong. The pit had no bottom. 48 hours after the meeting in the precinct conference room, the video from the Tesla's Sentry mode didn't just leak, it exploded. Raymond Clark, citing public interest and the necessity of transparency in a federal investigation, released the footage to the press. It was everywhere. It was on the morning news shows, the evening cable debates, and every social media timeline in the country. The hashtag Hawker Oak Creek Driveway trended #1 globally for 3 days straight. The contrast was what sold it. The calm, articulate black woman identifying herself as a surgeon versus the sneering, aggressive cop who dismissed her existence with a slur. The audio of Uppity BH became the soundbite of the year. The fallout for Miller was nuclear. First came the neighbors. The same people in Oak Creek who had peered through their blinds while he assaulted Vivian now wanted to distance themselves from the racist cop. Miller lived in a modest home 3 towns over, but the press found him. News vans camped on his lawn. When he went to the grocery store, people filmed him with their phones, shouting questions about why he hated doctors. He stopped going out. He ordered food, but half the time, the delivery drivers would cancel the order once they realized who the customer was. Then came the financial ruin. Raymond and Vivian followed through on the lawsuit. It wasn't just a threat, it was a siege. Eleanor Vance, the personal injury shark, filed a civil suit seeking $25 million in damages. Since Miller had acted outside of department policy and with malice, the city's insurance provider invoked a clause refusing to cover his legal defense or personal liability. He was on his own. His bank accounts were frozen. The union, realizing he was radioactive, cut him loose completely to save their own reputation. Sergeant Thorne gave a press conference where he claimed, "The behavior exhibited by Mr. Miller does not reflect the values of this union," effectively throwing Miller to the wolves to save the pack. But the hardest blow came from inside his own home. 2 weeks after the incident, Miller sat in his darkened living room, the curtains drawn against the prying lenses of the paparazzi. His wife, Sheila, walked in. She was carrying a suitcase. "Where are you going?" Miller asked, his voice raspy. He hadn't shaved in days. "My sister's," Sheila said, not looking at him. "I can't do this, Brody. The threats, the shame. My boss told me today that clients are uncomfortable working with me because of my last name. You destroyed us." "I did it for us," Miller shouted, desperate. "I was trying to protect the town. I made a mistake." "You didn't make a mistake," Sheila said, finally looking at him with cold, dead eyes. "You showed the world who you really are. And I don't want to be married to that man." She left. The door clicked shut, and the silence that followed was louder than the sirens had ever been. 3 months later, the criminal trial began. It was a federal case, United States versus Brody Miller. Miller wanted to fight it. He wanted to claim he was stressed, that the video was taken out of context, but his public defender, an overworked man who clearly didn't want the case, laughed at him. "You have no defense, Brody," the lawyer said. "The video is high def. The audio is studio quality. You have the district attorney's wife on the stand, and she's a neurosurgeon with nerve damage. If you go to trial, a jury will bury you under the jail. They will give you 20 years just to make a point." Miller took the plea deal. The sentencing hearing was the final nail. The courtroom was packed. Vivian sat in the front row, Raymond's hand firmly holding her left one. Her right hand, the golden hand of a surgeon, was in a sleek, black compression brace. Miller stood before the judge in an orange jumpsuit. He looked smaller, shrunken. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a pathetic trembling. "Mr. Miller," the federal judge boomed, peering over his spectacles, "you abused the power entrusted to you by the public. You allowed your prejudice to dictate your actions, and in doing so, you robbed a brilliant surgeon of her peace and potentially her career. You are a disgrace to the uniform you once wore." The gavel came down. "I sentence you to 8 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $4.5 million, though I suspect you will never have the means to do so. Take him away." As the marshals grabbed Miller's arms to handcuff him, he looked back. He locked eyes with Vivian. He expected to see gloating. He expected to see a smirk. But Vivian just looked at him with a profound, pitying sadness. She didn't hate him anymore. He was too small for her hate. He was just a tragic, broken thing that had to be removed from society. That look of indifference hurt Miller more than the handcuffs. He realized then that he hadn't just lost his freedom. He had lost his significance. He was nobody. 1 year later, the morning sun poured into the master bedroom of the Clark residence on Sycamore Ridge. It was a different kind of light than that rainy night. Warm, hopeful, golden. Dr. Vivian Clark stood in front of the full-length mirror. She was dressed in her scrubs, the familiar blue fabric that felt like a second skin. She raised her right hand. The brace was gone. It had been a year of hell. Physical therapy 3 times a week, painful nerve stimulation sessions, nights where she woke up crying because her thumb wouldn't grasp a coffee mug without shaking. There were moments she thought she would never hold a scalpel again, moments where she thought Miller had won. But Vivian was a surgeon. She didn't believe in can't. She believed in procedure, practice, and persistence. She flexed her fingers. Open, close, open, close. The movement was fluid. The tremor was gone. "Ready?" Raymond stood in the doorway. He looked different, too. He was no longer just the district attorney. The polling numbers for his upcoming attorney general run were astronomical. The Clark case had propelled him into the national spotlight as the champion of justice reform. "I think so," Vivian smiled. "It's just a simple laminectomy. Routine." "Nothing you do is routine, Viv," Raymond said, kissing her forehead. "You save lives." They drove to St. Jude's together. This time, there were no police cruisers trailing at them. The Oak Creek Police Department had undergone a complete overhaul. The new chief, appointed after Harrigan's forced resignation, had implemented mandatory bias training and strict body cam protocols. The culture of the town had shifted. The neighbors who had once peered suspiciously now waved as the Clarks drove by. They had learned the hard way that you don't judge a book by its cover, especially when the book can sue you into the Stone Age. Vivian scrubbed in. The smell of the antiseptic soap was the sweetest perfume she had ever known. She walked into the OR, hands held high. The nurses and the anesthesiologist stopped what they were doing. They broke into applause. It wasn't loud, just a respectful, rhythmic clapping. "Welcome back, Doctor," the head nurse said, eyes misting up. Vivian nodded, her eyes smiling above her mask. "Thank you. Now let's get to work." Scalpel. The metal instrument was placed in her hand. It felt heavy, cool, and perfect. Her grip was iron. Hundreds of miles away, in the recreation room of the USP McCreary Federal Penitentiary, the television was blaring. Inmate 89402, formerly Officer Brody Miller, sat on a plastic chair, staring at the screen. He was thinner now, his buzz cut, grown out into patchy, graying hair. He kept his head down, mostly. Ex-cops didn't have an easy time inside. He had to pay protection to the Aryan Brotherhood, just to keep from getting shanked in the shower. And even they looked at him with disdain. He was a failure in everyone's eyes. On the TV screen, a news anchor was beaming. And in a triumphant return, Dr. Vivian Clark performed her first surgery today since the brutal attack that made national headlines last year. The operation was a complete success. Meanwhile, her husband, Raymond Clark, announced his candidacy for State Attorney General, promising to continue his fight against corruption. The camera cut to a shot of Vivian and Raymond leaving the hospital. They looked like royalty. Strong, beautiful, untouchable. Vivian held up her right hand to wave at the cameras, and the sunlight caught her wedding ring, making it sparkle. Miller felt a bile rise in his throat. He looked at his own hands. They were rough, calloused from mopping prison floors for 12 cents an hour. "Hey, 402, a large inmate shouted from the pool table. "That the lady you messed with?" Miller didn't answer. "Yeah, that's her," another inmate laughed. "Man, you really picked the wrong one, didn't you? You thought you were the shark, but you were just the bait." The room erupted in laughter. Miller shrank into his chair. He closed his eyes, but he couldn't block out the image of Vivian's steady hand waving on the screen. He realized then the true nature of his karma. It wasn't the prison cell. It wasn't the divorce. It was the knowledge that his attempt to destroy her had only made her stronger. He had tried to bury her, but he didn't realize she was a seed. He had watered her with his hate, and she had bloomed into something magnificent. And he? He was just the dirt she had risen from. Miller stood up and walked back to his cell, the laughter of the other inmates echoing in his ears like a sentence that would never end. In the end, Officer Miller's downfall wasn't just about a broken law. It was about a broken worldview. He saw Dr. Clark and assumed weakness, assumed she was someone he could bully without consequence. He failed to realize that true power isn't about a badge or a gun. It's about dignity, intelligence, and the resilience to stand tall when someone tries to push you down. The Clarks didn't just win a lawsuit. They exposed a rot in the system and forced a change that protected the entire community. It's a powerful reminder that when you strike at someone, you better be sure you aren't striking at a pillar that holds up the sky. Because if it falls on you. What would you have done if you were in Dr. Clark's shoes? Would you have kept your cool, or would you have fought back physically? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We have plenty more tales of karma and retribution coming your way. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.